Hi guys, so today I'm going to be showing you my 20th Century Fox DVD collection, set start out of everything they've released so far. Set start. This is from 1995 to 2020, set start. First one is Strictly Ballroom, this came in 1995, it's PG. There's a side, there's a back, it's PG, parental guidance, gender room, some scenes may be suitable with young children. Here's a disc. Next is Romeo and Juliet, this came in 1996, it's a 12, there's a side, there's a back, 12 contains murder, violence, suitable only for persons 12 years and over, not to be supplied to any person by their age. Here's a disc. Next is Moulin Rouge, this came in 2001, it's a 15, there's a side, there's a back, 15 contains murder, sex, violence, suitable only for persons 15 years and over, not to be supplied to any person by their age. Here's disc 1. Here's disc 2. Next is Madagascar, this came in 2005, it's a U. There's a side, there's a back, suit contains very mild language and violence, University of Hull. Here's a disc. Next is Night at the Museum 1 and 2. This came in 2006 and the second one came out in 2009. It's PG. There's a side. There's a back. PG turns mild comic violence and scary moments. Parental guidance, gender room, some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is The Simpsons movie, this came in 2007, it's PG. There's a side, there's a back, PG contains mild language, sexual innuendo and comic violence, parental guidance, gender room, some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel, this came in 2009, it's a U. There's a side, there's a back, U, very mild language, University of Hull. Here's a disc. Next is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, this came in 2010, it's PG. There's a side, there's a back, PG contains mild language, parental guidance, gender room, some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is Rio, this came in 2011, it's a U. There's a side, there's a back, suit contains mild comics, threat, slapstick violence and innuendo, University of Hull. Here's a disc. Next is How to Train Your Dragon 2, this came in 2014, it's PG. There's a side, there's the other side, there's a back, PG, mild violence, threat, parental guidance, gender room, some scenes may be suitable for young children. Guest leaflet is the back. Here's a disc. Next is Home, this came in 2015, it's a U. There's a side, there's a back, CMR, threat, slapstick, University of Hull. Here's a disc. Next is The Martian, this came in 2015, it's a 12. There's a side, there's a back, 12 and frequent strong language, injury details, suitable only for persons 12 years and over, not to be supplied to any person by their age. Here's a disc. Next is Kung Fu Panda 3, this came in 2016, it's PG. There's a side, there's a back, PG, mild martial arts, action, parental guidance, gender room, some scenes may be suitable for young children. Guest leaflet as a back. Here's a disc. Next is Trolls, this came in 2017, it's a U. Next is Trolls, this came in 2016, it's a U. There's a side, There's a back, CML Comics Right, University of Hull. Gets leaflet as a back. Here's a disc. Next is Revolting Rhymes. This came in 2016. It's PG. There's a side. There's a back. PG contains mild threat, common violence, parental guidance, gender view, but some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is A Dog's Purpose. This came in 2017. It's PG. There's a side. There's a back. PG contains mild threat, emotional scenes, parental guidance, gender view, but some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is The Boss Baby. This came in 2017. It's You. There's a side. There's a back. Secretaries Vermont Comics Threat Root Humor, University of Hull. Here's a disc. Next is Dive Wimpy Kid for the Long Haul. This came in 2017. It's You. There's a side. There's a back. Secretaries Vermont Bad Language Root Humor, University of Hull. Guest leaflet as a back. Here's a disc. Next is Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. This came in 2017. It's You. There's a side. There's the other side. There's a back. Secretaries Mark Rude Humor Comics Right, University of Hull. Here's a disc. Next is Goodbye Christopher Robin. Came in 2017. It's PG. There's a side. There's a back. PG mild war violence, parental guidance, gender view, but some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is The Greatest Showman. This came in 2017. It's PG. There's a side. There's a back. PG brief mild threat violence, parental guidance, gender view, but some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is The House with the Clockness Walls. This came in 2018. It's 12. There's a side. There's a back. 12 contains murder, stress, scary scenes, suitable only for past 12 years and over, not to be spied 10 plus by their age. Here's a disc. Next is Bohemian Rhapsody. This came in 2018. It's 12. There's a side. There's a back. 12 contains murder, sex references, drug references, a frequent strong language, suitable only for past 12 years and over, not to be spied 10 plus by their age. Here's a disc. Next is Zog. This came in 2018. It's You. There's a side. There's the other side. There's a back. Secretaries number 2 likely to offend or harm, University of Hull. Here's a disc. Next is The Kid Who Would Be King. This came in 2019. It's PG. There's a side. There's a back. PG mild threat, scary scenes, violence, language, parental guidance, gender view, but some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. Next is Spies in Disguise. This came in 2019. It's PG. There's a side. There's a back. PG mild violence, threat, rude humor, parental guidance, gender view, but some scenes may be suitable for young children. Here's a disc. And the last one is Jojo Rabbit. This came in 2020. It's 12. There's a side. There's a back. 12 discrimination, violence, body image, sex references, strong language, suitable only for person of 12 years and over, not to be spied any plus by their age. Here's a disc. So yeah guys, thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you in my next video, and goodbye.